Hi everyone, hope you're all doing well. It's been a while since I reviewed a film, since the last one I saw was Despicable Me 4 back in early July. But that doesn't mean I kept myself busy. I've been watching some animated films that I hadn't seen before, and there's a lot of stuff that I can briefly talk about here. Um, First I saw The Imaginary, the new animated film from Studio Ponic, and that one was really good. I also saw Ghost in the Shell for the first time, and that was truly great, easily one of the coolest animated films of the 90s. There was a cute romance story I watched called The Stranger by the Shore. That one tugged my heartstrings. I finally saw Beavis and Butthead Do America, and that one was hilarious. Just an absolutely great comedy featuring the titular duo. And I also even saw Mind Game, which was a pretty remarkable debut film from Masasaki Yuasa. Just a very creative and visually stunning animated film to watch. Also, I saw Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. Yeah, not in the same caliber of those films. Honestly, when it comes to the animated films that were coming out in 2024, this SpongeBob spin-off film was easily one of the biggest films I was not looking forward to the most. Definitely not the biggest one. That dishonor still goes to Spellbound, but yeah, not one of my most anticipated either. There's a big reason why, but I'll get to it in a bit. And I guess we should start out talking about how we got here, since this is certainly a strange animated film to be coming out this year. And the story leading up to the release of this film is really quite strange. And in order for us to talk about how this one came out, we have to talk about the last SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run, which I did not like at all. The computer animation was good, and there were elements that I didn't dislike, but the big problems of the film mostly came down to the story, which I found a giant mess. It had scenes that were just there for padding, it wasn't very funny, and it also was just a weak premise in general. It wasn't a very good film, but that didn't dissuade Nickelodeon, as they were determined to keep their biggest cash cow going, and they announced more films after its release. In early 2020, Nickelodeon announced they were making some spin-off films featuring other characters from the show, and a year later, they announced the first one that would follow the undersea squirrel from Texas, Sandy Cheeks. And I liked Sandy. A lot. If I had to name my favorite character from the show, I would probably say her. She's smart, funny, has a great skill at karate, and proud of her home state of Texas. It seemed like she would work well with her own feature film. It was initially intended for Paramount Plus, but the film was instead moved to Netflix last year for reasons that I'm not entirely sure, with a release date sometime in the summer this year. But then in early January, the film hit a major bump because of an unfortunate event. It got leaked. And I don't mean parts of it got leaked, no, I mean the entire film was leaked online. Paramount tried their best to take it down, but the damage was done, as several people did end up watching it, and they ended up reporting that it was pretty terrible. Many people had seen it, except for me. I didn't watch the film at the time when it was leaked, mostly because I don't like watching films that get leaked before they're supposed to be released, since it really hurts the careers of crew members who worked on it, and plus, I wanted to give this film an honest chance. So I waited until now to finally see it with its official release, and I went in hoping that it would be better than people made it out to be. Maybe this film could be actually fun in the end. That was foolish of me. Boy, that was foolish of me. Guys, I've seen some bad animated films that came out this decade, but this is another level of bad. This is without a doubt one of the most poorly made animated films I've ever seen. And let me make this clear, I'm only a casual fan of SpongeBob. I'm looking at this as a film. It is just bewildering. Like, I am really struggling to comprehend how Nickelodeon thought this film could be approved for release in the state that this is in, because it is a disaster. If you've heard some bad things about it, let me just reassure you. This really is as bad as you've heard. Okay, the plot of this. So, deep down in Bikini Bottom, Sandy Cheeks, played again by Carolyn Lawrence, is enjoying her life with her underwater friends when suddenly the entire town is scooped up by a science company called Boots, headed for her home state of Texas. Her and SpongeBob, played again by Tom Kenny, are left behind, and it's up to them to get the town back into the ocean and away from the scientists at a lab led by their new owner, played by Wanda Sykes. And yes, she does have a name, but I'm going to bring it up later in the review because her name, it really is so bad. And I think it's something I need to talk about. And along the way, SpongeBob and Sandy end up running into her own family, who are circus performers, and it's up to them to get to the city of Galveston to get the town back. So, yeah, the premise itself doesn't seem that terrible. I mean, it's not the best plot I heard for a SpongeBob film, but it's certainly not awful. How could you screw it up? Well, turns out there's numerous ways to screw up this story. The first problem is the pacing. This is not the first animated film this year that I've reviewed that's had a problem with rushed pacing, but it's certainly the one that's had the biggest problem with it. I am not kidding when I say this film feels like it is trying to speedrun its story. I mean, we don't even get attached to Bikini Bottom and Sandy's life down below. The entire town is literally scooped up in less than 10 minutes into the film, and bam, we're off to the races. I don't mind films that want to get the ball rolling quick and get the audience hooked in, but you need to set up the stakes and what there is to lose before the hero set off. I mean, this is something the previous SpongeBob films did well, but here, it's all speed and no slow moments. Even the film's one slow moment where Sandy bonds with her family doesn't feel like we can breathe because it feels so quick. So by the end of the film, I just found myself getting tired after a while. And it's not just the fact that it moves too fast, some of the scenes also go on way too long. There are scenes that just do not know when to stop after they serve their purpose. They keep going and going like the Energizer Bunny. Mostly it seems to pad out the running time because the film has so little story to work off of. Like there was this rattlesnake gang that the duo battled that went on way too long. And even worse is this ridiculous police chase that just drags and drags way longer than it needs to be. And after a while, I just thought, can we get on with it? Like, the film doesn't give them a whole lot to do compared to the previous films, and it was just kind of boring to watch. And that's something that SpongeBob shouldn't be. This movie is only around 70 minutes, but man, it feels like a much longer 70 minutes than it needs to be. This is the kind of plot that should really be about only 30 minutes. And speaking of the plot, it is just really pointless. It doesn't feel like a whole lot happened here or was accomplished. I mean, I don't know what I was supposed to take away from this. There's a few set pieces that aren't exactly that special, and then the film ends. That's it. What was the point of this? But the biggest problem with the film is arguably its most fatal flaw. It's not funny. Like, at all. This film throws so many jokes at the wall, hoping one of them sticks, and not a single joke lands. Not one. The comedy in this film was really trying hard for laughs, either through the slapstick and dialogue, and it just doesn't land.
And all my streaming videos on demand, I can't demand them anymore!
I really want to understand how a line this bad could be written into a script, could be recorded into a microphone, can be edited into a film, and no one looked at it and thought, you know, this is a bad line, maybe we shouldn't include it. Like, I don't even get the joke here. All of his friends in his city got kidnapped, and he's more upset that he can't get to his streaming service anymore? Yeah, God, I don't get it. And it also doesn't help that the visual comedy here also really doesn't work. Like, what's the joke here? That SpongeBob doesn't know how to wink? Like, I don't get it. Winking is not that hard. I know it's trying to be silly, but silly comedy is supposed to be, you know, funny. And sometimes even smart. This comedy is just really lame. And that leads me to talk about the animation and visuals of this, because... oh boy. The film had a lot of talented storyboard artists work on it, and I can tell they were clearly giving it their all and doing some zany stuff, but their work sadly really got watered down in the animation. The computer animation is pretty stiff and weak, and a lot of the zany comedy doesn't work. It needed to be fast-paced and energetic, and here, it just looks dull. But that's not even the worst part about this film. The worst part is the special effects. Because these special effects are anything but special. The film doesn't look great when they're underwater, but once they get on land, it goes from bad to worse, because the visuals in this film are hideous. Like, there are shots where SpongeBob and Sandy are wandering around the Texas desert, when in reality, it's actually the Bistidin wilderness in New Mexico, but we'll just pretend it's Texas. And the shots look so poorly put together. It honestly looks like they grabbed images of rocks off of Shutterstock and just threw the characters on top of them. Like, they didn't even blend into the backgrounds well at all. And it's even crazier because this is not the first time SpongeBob has done this, and it's looked better in films older than this. But then there's some of the other CGI in the film, which, oh my god, it is shockingly bad. None of these effects look convincing, it looked really rushed, and worst of all, they look just hideous. And considering this film came out the same year as Madam Web and Harold and the Purple Crayon, that is saying a lot. And I haven't even gotten to the absolute worst effect in the film. The worst effect in this film is easily the villain's backstory, where the film attempts to put Wanda Sykes' body on a younger person, and good God, it looks so amateur. I am not kidding when I say this, but it straight up reminded me of Baby Geniuses. Quite honestly, I think the effect in Baby Geniuses looks better than the one in this film, and that effect nearly made Roger Ebert throw up. This is just embarrassing. Like, how could anyone have thought this looked good? I know this is a joke, but still, jokes should be funny, and even then, this effect should still look better than the stuff I saw on AFV where Tom Bergeron photoshopped his head onto people's crappy home videos. And I guess we should talk about the characters, and I don't even have that many good things to say about them either. I feel bad for Carolyn Lawrence because I really like her as Sandy, but boy, her character wasn't given much to do here. Sandy doesn't seem like she grows as a character. Like, what does she learn in this film? What does she take away from this? Don't ask questions. There are no answers. There's just no stakes with her character, and she's not even given a lesson or a moral to learn. Like, the film tries to throw an obligatory sad scene for her, but it's hard for us to feel bad for her when we don't know what she's supposed to learn here. As for SpongeBob, he really got under my skin here. The film tries to make him the comic relief, but they really went overboard with how stupid they made him. SpongeBob is naive, but he's not an idiot, and this film really made him so stupid to bear. And it's even worse because the film tries to have him provide a lot of laughs, and none of the comedy is funny. As for the rest of the recurring characters, they're not given anything to do, so let's move on to the new characters. First is Sandy's family, who are really wasted potential here. The idea of having them be a traveling circus is kind of funny, but the characters are really underdeveloped and not given anything to do apart from take the characters to their destination. And it's a real shame because this film should be a great launching pad for getting to know more about Sandy and her past and the relationships with her family, but the film doesn't take time for that. Hell, the film tries to set up a conflict as the family wants Sandy to stay in Texas despite her now being a scientist living in Bikini Bottom, and then it just instantly forgets it. Like, it's never brought up again. Like, Sandy's mom says this one line, and that's it. That's all the conflict there is. Even Despicable Me 4, which also couldn't finish its conflicts well, at least it tried to continue some of the threads. It didn't finish them either, but at least it continued them. This doesn't even continue it. It just reveals it and then drops it like nothing happened. So what's the point of saying it if you're not doing anything with it? This makes no sense. And speaking of things that make no sense, the villains. And they are awful. First of all, the henchmen are so dumb. And I know it's typical in an animated film for the lead villain to have stupid henchmen, but they still have to be competent and not complete idiots. Like, a good example is Jasper and Horace in 101 Dalmatians. They're not bright in the slightest, but at least they have brain cells that make them the credible threats they are. These two are just way too dumb that I don't think they know how to breathe. Even the stupid triplets in Home on the Range aren't as stupid as them. And then you have the head honcho herself. Let's get to her. First of all, her name is, and I kid you not, Tsunami. Get it? Tsunami? Are we really seriously relying on lame Bart Simpson prank call names for villains now? I wouldn't be surprised that they didn't name one of the henchmen in the film Hugh Jass. In fact, just for fun, I'm gonna pull up my list of villain names that me and my friends came up with that sound like weather phenomenon that would have made perfect companions with Tsunami. Ahem. Tornado. Typhoon. Hurricane. Cyclone. Avalanche, Volcano, Earthquake, Sunny Sky, Misty Fields, and finally, Rainstorm. Names that would have worked just as well in this film. But yeah, getting past her stupid name, she's just a terrible villain in general. She's not threatening, her backstory is lame, her big evil scheme makes no sense, and even the big reveal of her character is laughably pathetic, and there's no build-up to it whatsoever. This is everything a villain should not be, and it is just a complete and utter waste of Wanda Sykes. So yeah, if I haven't made this clear, I hate this film. It's awful. But it just leaves me wondering, what happened? How did a film like this go so horribly wrong? Well, I think it mainly comes down to some of the choices made in production. First of all, this film's premise was apparently considered for Sponge on the Run and was initially rejected, which why they thought it would work now and not in 2020 is beyond me. But the thing that baffles me the most is the director they chose to helm this film. The film was made by Liza Johnson, who has worked a lot on well-received material, both in movies and TV shows, and I really have to wonder why Nickelodeon hired her. She was apparently hired based on her work of an episode of What We Do in the Shadows, but I think they made a grave miscalculation hiring her. She has directed a couple of comedy TV shows, like episodes of Silicon Valley and Buried, but it seems to me that her bread and butter is mainly dramatic material. She's done episodes of Feud, American Horror Story, A Series of Unfortunate Events, The Last of Us. She doesn't seem like a director that was made to direct something as wacky and over the top as SpongeBob. And worst of all, I get the impression that she did not know what she was doing. Based on interviews I read, she seemed really uncomfortable helming a project that involved a lot of animation, and I could tell. It seems she had to learn this way of filmmaking way too quickly to process, and I get the feeling she was lost making this film and was overrun by execs telling her what to do. In fact, it really reminded me of another film where execs took advantage of another inexperienced director, Madam Web. I mean, both films had directors mainly known for TV, both films involved properties deeply beloved by the studio, and both feel like they had executive fingerprints written all over it. I don't feel comfortable blaming this film on Johnson because she never should have been chosen to direct this film to begin with. This is all on Nickelodeon. And it's a reason why I consider Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie, an absolute disaster. This film doesn't work at all. The story is badly written and not funny in the slightest, the animation is clunky, and the visual effects are hideous, and the characters are either underdeveloped and just plain stupid. This was an unbearable film to watch, and I cannot recommend it in the slightest, even if you are the biggest SpongeBob fan willing to forgive its major flaws. This film really has nothing working for it, and it's not only the worst animated film Nickelodeon has ever put out, it quite honestly might be the worst new animated film I've seen this decade so far. And I've seen some bad films this decade. I mean, say what you will about Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild, at least it had pretty great sets. Say what you will about Rally Road Racers, it at least had the Take On Me sequence. This has nothing. And that is why it pains me to give this film my lowest possible grade. Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie, gets a big, fat 1. It really is a disaster, and I haven't given out that grade to a new animated film since Norm of the North, Keys to the Kingdom. And if I'm comparing your film to a sequel to a film where Rob Schneider played a twerking polar bear, you've done something horribly wrong. I know this is not going to be the last SpongeBob film since we have 2 more coming out next year, but I hope both of them are better than this, and I'm going to remain optimistic for both in the hopes that they learn from this film's mistakes. But as far as this film goes, well, this is not my kind of nautical nonsense. Ugh, the wild robot cannot come out soon enough. I swear to God.
Side effects may include mad fry cook skills, porousness, and chronic optimism. Not recommended for non-sponges.